The grand chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with unease. Delegates from a dozen species sat encircling the vast round table, their alien shapes casting bizarre shadows beneath the cold blue-white glow. At the heart of their dispute lay humanity, the youngest and most divisive member of their ancient alliance. Ambassador Vex of the Altari leaned in, his silvery skin shimmering as he spoke. Humans have sat among us for barely half a year, and already they clamor for equal votes. They push for trade accords. They press for military ties. He let the silence stretch, his words hanging heavy in the air. They forget their place, Counselor. Thou of the insectoid crash clipped his mandibles in harsh agreement. Their world holds little worth. Earth rates no higher than Class 7 on the habitability charts. Most of our homeworlds rest at Class 3 or 4. These humans crawl from a soft, forgiving sphere, yet strut as though they are equals to the ancients. The debate had dragged on endlessly. Some counselors pressed to dismiss humanity's demands outright. Others urged granting them token positions in galactic dealings. But Vex carried another design, one that could settle the human question forever. I propose we grant them precisely what they crave, Vex said, his voice low and cold. They seek to prove their worth? Then let them prove it on Corath Prime. Silence washed over the chamber. Even the translators seemed to hesitate before echoing the name into alien tongues. Corath Prime. Every civilization knew it well. A Class 15 death world, the highest tier of danger. 3 expeditions had already tried to establish settlements there within the last century. Not one endured longer than a week. The Vrex lost 200 colonists in just 4 days. The proud Zephyrans abandoned the attempt after only 2, leaving nothing but automated beacons crying into the void. Even the resilient silicon-born rocklings withdrew after half their expedition perished. To the planet's merciless nature. You cannot mean this, whispered Elder Nera of the Gentle Symphons. That world has claimed thousands. Its storms can flay bone bare. Its gravity would crush most of our kind. Its air is poison. Vex's smile cut coldly across his face, never touching his eyes. Precisely. These humans boast of toughness because of petty wars on their fragile world. They think themselves worthy of respect simply for clawing into space. Let them face a true trial. Counselor Bricks of the Tide Walkers gurgled uneasily. And should they succeed? Should they form a colony? Impossible, Vex answered flatly. Our best projections grant them less than 2% beyond the first week. They will die swiftly or retreat in shame. Either outcome sets them in their rightful place. The vote proved closer than Vex expected, but it carried. 7 for 4 against, 1 abstention. The humans were granted the chance to found a colony. On Corath Prime, framed as an opportunity to prove themselves before the Galactic Order. 3 weeks later, Captain Reed stood upon the bridge of the colony vessel Determination, scanning the official mission briefing yet again. His crew moved, with quiet focus around him, preparing for what the Council hailed as humanity's greatest trial. Reed, a seasoned man in his 40s with graying hair and calm, practiced hands, had spent 2 decades in Earth's merchant marine before turning to colonial service. He had faced harsh worlds before, but none so forbidding as the one described. In the reports, Captain, called Navigator Hayes from her console. We're receiving the final data relay from the Council. Environmental metrics, atmosphere readings, surface mapping, what little they've managed. Reed inclined his head. Put the essentials on the main display. The bridge's vast screen flared alive with data, drawing sharp breaths from several officers. Corath Prime loomed larger than Earth, pulling nearly twice the gravity. Its air was technically breathable, yet laced with corrosive pollutants that ate through metals within days. Surface temperatures swung from freezing to boiling, shifting, with storms that struck without warning. The planet endured acid rain, lightning storms that could last for weeks, and seismic activity that regularly reshaped the landscape. And the wildlife? Asked Dr. Stone, the expedition's chief scientist. She was an asthma woman with curious eyes who seemed more excited than worried about their destination. Hayes pulled up another data file. Hostile doesn't begin to cover it. Carnivorous plants that actively hunt prey. Pack hunters the size of elephants. Flying creatures with acidic breath. And that's just what previous expeditions managed to catalog. For she didn't finish the sentence. Before they all died, completed Chief Engineer Mills dryly. Mills was a big man with calloused hands who'd spent years building settlements on frontier worlds. Well, at least we know what we're walking into. Reed studied the data for a long moment. Something bothered him. Unease lingered over the mission, though Reed couldn't quite define why. The Galactic Council had been unusually generous in granting this chance, especially considering how they'd dismissed humanity's earlier petitions. They had even supplied a ship and provisions, though Reed noted the gear was older stock, dependable, but far from cutting edge. "Captain," reported Communications Officer Lang, Council observation vessel detected on long range. "There. Shadowing us at distance." Reed's brow furrowed. That detail hadn't appeared in the briefing. Dr. Stone glanced up from her instruments. Perhaps they intend to chronicle humanity's first effort to tame a Class 15 world for historical record. Mills gave a dry laugh. Or they just want front row seats when we fail. Anyone else notice the supplies stretch exactly 6 months? Not a year, not 2, just 6. Like they're timing our collapse. Reed had reached the same conclusion. The more he pondered it, the less this seemed like opportunity, and the more like a trial or worse, a snare. Still, 500 colonists were depending on him to guide them to their new world, no matter the Council's intent. "Time to arrival at Corath Prime?" he asked. 18 hours, sir," Hayes replied. Reed surveyed his crew. "Good." The volunteers who had signed on despite the obvious peril. Beyond the bridge, down the narrow corridors, waited 500 more souls who had abandoned Earth for a chance at something greater. Families with children in tow, young pairs chasing adventure, elders craving one last horizon, scientists eager to dissect a wild frontier, and engineers ready to shape order from chaos. Each had studied the reports. Each understood the dangers. And still, they came because that was humanity's way. Faced with the impossible, they did not retreat. They adapted. "All right, everyone," Reed said, his voice firm but measured. 18 hours left to prepare for descent. He turned crisply. "Dr. Stone, full breakdown of the environmental scans. Mills, recheck our gear and line up contingency plans for inevitable failures. Hayes, chart the safest landing trajectory." As his officers moved swiftly, Reed studied Corath Prime's data one final time. Somewhere behind them, an alien vessel shadowed their course, crammed with counselors certain they were watching a doomed colony. Reed's mouth curved into a hard smile. Perhaps failure awaited them. Perhaps even human resolve would snap against a Class 15 world. But if the Council believed humanity would yield without resistance, they were in for a harsh lesson. The determination surged onward, carrying its 500 souls into what the galaxy assumed was suicide. Aboard the observer craft, Ambassador Vex watched with smug delight, already drafting his triumphant report on humanity's collapse. Neither he nor Reed could imagine what would unfold once humans stepped onto their first true death world. The first assault came as a stench. Even before the landing craft touched soil, the shuttle's filters failed to mask the acrid reek that bled through every seal. It was like inhaling a furnace packed with rotting eggs and acid smoke. Captain Reed tightened his harness as Shuttle Alpha bucked violently through the wrath of Corath Prime's atmosphere. Around him, 25 colonists held on tight while the small craft shook like a toy in a hurricane. Through the tiny windows, flashes of green lightning lit up angry purple clouds that stretched to every horizon. Landing zone coming up, Khaled Pilot Martinez over the intercom, her voice strained with concentration. It's going to be rough, people. This storm isn't giving us any breaks. Reed looked at the readouts on his wrist display. Outside temperature, 47 C. Atmospheric pressure, 2.3 times Earth normal. Wind speed 85 kilometers per hour with gusts up to 120, and they were landing during what the previous survey, Team Shad called mild weather. The shuttle slammed into the ground hard enough to rattle teeth through the cabin. Reed heard the hiss of the air. Recycling system working overtime to filter the toxic atmosphere outside. Emergency lights flickered as the shuttle's electronics struggled with the electromagnetic interference from Thekenstat lightning. Hull integrity holding, Martinez reported. But I'm seeing corrosion warnings already. Whatever's in this air, it doesn't like our metal. Reed unstrapped himself and moved to the small window. What he saw outside made his stomach tighten. The landscape looked like a battlefield designed by nightmares. Black soil stretched in all directions, broken by twisted rock formations that glowed faintly with some kind of mineral phosphorescence. Strange trees, if they could be Khaled trees, reached toward the storm clouds with branches that moved too much. In the wind, like they were grasping for something. "Captain," came Dr. Stone's voice over the radio from Shuttle Beta. "You need to see this. Our landing scanners are picking up movement, big movement, and it's heading." "Brilliant, Captain. Give me a few minutes to run some scans." While she worked, Reed turned to the colonists in his shuttle. They were scared. He could see it in their faces. But they weren't panicking. Marines Beck and Torres had their weapons ready. Engineer Mills was studying the whole damage with professional interest. Even the familiars with children were staying calm, trusting their leaders to find the solution. "Okay, people," Reed said. "Here's what we're going to do. These creatures are treating us like prey, which means they're probably not as smart as they are dangerous. Mills, what would happen if we vented some of our waste heat through the hull?" Mills understood immediately. "Make ourselves look less appetizing." "Yeah, that could work. Give me 5 minutes." "Me 5, Dr. Stone," Reed continued. "Can you identify what these things are actually hunting? What's their normal food source?" "Already on it," came her reply. "Fascinating, Captain. These stalker vines appear to be ambush predators that normally hunt something called tunnel borers. Large underground creatures that generate significant heat signatures. If we could somehow mimic the defensive mechanisms of these tunnel borers." "You mean fight back?" said Marine Beck, checking his weapon. "I like that better than hiding." Reed made his decision. "All shuttles, this is Reed. We're not waiting for rescue. We're going on the offensive, but we do this smart. Dr. Stone, I want you to identify wake points on these creatures. Mills, prepare defensive modifications to our shuttles. Beck, Torres, and all security personnel. You're with me." For first contact, Ambassador Vex nearly dropped his drink when the first human emerged from Shuttle Alpha. Captain Reed stepped out into the toxic atmosphere of Corath Prime, wearing a basic environmental suit and carrying what appeared to be a modified mining laser. Behind him were more humans armed and moving with the kind of tactical precision that made Vex uncomfortable. "What are they doing?" Cass asked, staring at the screens. "No species has ever voluntarily exited their craft during a predator assault. On Corath Prime, the stalker vine that had been trying to eat Shuttle Alpha turned toward the humans with obvious interest. It was a massive thing, easily 3 meters tall with a trunk like a twisted tree and branches that ended in tooth-filled mouths. It would have been able to kill 3 humans without effort. Instead, Reed calmly raised his mining laser and Ferreira sustained. Beamed directly at what Dr. Stone had identified as the creature's primary nervous cluster. The stalker vine made a sound like steam escaping from a broken pipe and collapsed. "Effective," Reed said into his communicator, his voice perfectly steady. "Dr. Stone, the neural cluster location was accurate." How many more of these things are we dealing with? Shuttle Beta is engaging 4 stalker vines, came her reply, and Vex could hear weapon fire in the background. Shuttle Gamma has 2 acid spitters, but Mills has found their digestive weak point. And Captain, something interesting is happening. The local electromagnetic readings are actually decreasing now that we're fighting back. Reed nodded, then noticed something that made him smile grimly. Other creatures in the area, things that had been approaching to investigate the noise, had stopped moving toward the humans and were now backing away. They're pack hunters, he realized aloud. But they're not used to prey that fights back effectively. Torres, help me drag this carcass closer to the shuttles. I want other predators to see exactly what happens when they mess with humans. In the observation ship, Ambassador Vex stared at the screens in growing disbelief. Not only were the humans not dying, they were actively hunting the creatures that had destroyed 3 previous alien expeditions. And they were doing it calmly, methodically, like it was just another day at work. Sir, Cass said quietly, perhaps we should inform the Council that the situation is developing differently than predicted. Vex said nothing. On the screens he watched human engineers using parts from dead predators to reinforce their shuttle hulls against the acid rain. He watched human scientists collecting samples of everything they killed, already adapting to use local resources. He watched human families setting up temporary shelters in the wreckage of creatures that had terrorized this world for millennia. By the end of the first day, all 500 humans had successfully landed on Corath Prime. 0 casualties. 0 requests for evacuation. Instead, Captain Reed's final report of the day contained a single terrifying sentence. Landing phase complete. Vague. 3 weeks after landing, Engineer Mills stood in what used to be a nest of acid spitters and marveled at what he'd built. The former Predator Den had been transformed into humanity's first permanent structure on Corath Prime, a workshop that hummed with activity as colonists turned the planet's dangers into useful tools. Handman that acid sack, Mills called to his assistant, a young woman named Parker, who'd volunteered for the engineering corps. Carefully. Now these things still pack a punch even after the creature's dead. Parker lifted the biocontainer with practiced ease. 3 weeks of working with alien biochemistry had taught all the humans to handle materials that would have terrified them back on Earth. The acid sac contained a chemical compound that, when properly processed, could dissolve almost any mineral they'd encountered. On Corath Prime, perfect for mining operations, Mills muttered, carefully connecting the sack to their improvised refinery. What took the Vrex months to dig, we can clear in hours. Outside the workshop, the sound of construction echoed across their growing settlement. Where the first day had been about survival, the following weeks had been about adaptation. The humans had discovered something that the previous alien expeditions had missed. Corath Prime wasn't just trying to kill them. It was trying to communicate. Dr. Stone emerged from the workshop's mecha laboratory, holding a tablet displaying her latest findings. Her environmental suit was stained with various alien chemicals, but her eyes were bright with excitement. Mills, you need to see this, she said, pulling up a complex diagram. Remember how we thought the lightning storms were random? They're not. They follow patterns based on underground mineral deposits. The planet is essentially telling us where to find the richest mining sites. Mills looked at the data and whistled low. So every time we see those green lightning clusters, exactly. Concentrated rare earth deposits. Thesophyrians probably ran from storms that were actually pointing them toward the most valuable resources in the sector. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Reed, who walked in carrying what looked like a flowering branch. But as he got closer, both Mills and Dr. Stone could see that the flowers were actually small tooth-lined mouths that snapped playfully at Reed's fingers. Captain, Dr. Stone said carefully, please tell me you didn't just domesticate a carnivorous plant. Reed grinned. Meet our new security system. Turns out these snap blossomsonly attack creatures that produce certain stress hormones. They're basically living alarm systems. Plant them around the perimeter, and they'll only bite intruders. Mills shook his head in amazement. 3 weeks ago plants. Like that were trying to eat us. 3 weeks ago we were stressed and afraid, Reed replied. Now we're confident and settled. The local ecosystem is responding to our emotional state. It's like the planet can sense that we're not just visitors anymore. We're residents. This was the pattern that had emerged across their settlement. What the Galactic Council had classified as impossibly hostile was actually a complex ecosystem that responded to the behavior and attitude of new arrivals. Previous alien expeditions had approached Corath Prime with fear and desperation, triggering aggressive responses from the native life forms. But humans had approached it with curiosity and determination, and Theplinet had responded differently. Marine Beck jogged back into the settlement, returning from his morning patrol with a string of what looked like rainbow-colored fish slung over his shoulder. Except these fish had wings and could breathe fire when threatened. Breakfast is served, he announced to the group of colonists gathered around the central cooking area. Flame fisher is caught fresh from the thermal vents. Dr. Stone, you were right about the spice glands. They taste like nothing we've ever had on Earth. Beck had adapted to Corath Prime better than anyone expected. The former military man had discovered that the planet's dangerous wildlife responded well to confident, respectful hunting practices. Instead offering to eliminate threats, he'd learned to work with the ecosystem's natural patterns. Any trouble out there? Asked Torres, who was working on expanding their communications array. Potted a pack of tunnel crawlers about 2 kilometers east, Beck reported, but they kept their distance. I think word is spreading among the local wildlife that humans aren't easy prey. This wasn't just Beck's imagination. Dr. Stone had documented behavioral changes in dozens of species around their settlement. Predators that had been aggressive elitaria were now maintaining respectful distances. Scavengers were actually helping clean up areas around human structures. Even the notorious stalker vines had begun growing in patterns that seemed designed to provide natural windbreaks for the human buildings. It's like the planet is adapting to us at the same time we're adapting to it, Dr. Stone had written in her daily reports. Rather than seeing us as an invasive species, Corath Prime appears to be treating us as a new type of native life form. In the observation ship, Ambassador Vex paced back and forth in front of the monitoring screens, his silver skin flushed with. For wheat fields back on Earth, the plants he grew now would have been impossible to imagine. 6 months ago, hybrid organisms that combined human agricultural knowledge with Corath Prime's natural adaptability. Dr. Stone, Lou called, holding up a fruit that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. The energy melons are ready for harvest. Mills wants to test them in the new power generators. Dr. Stone accepted the fruit, marveling at its warm weight. The energy melons were perhaps humanity's greatest breakthrough on Corath Prime. Living batteries that could store and release electrical power with 95% efficiency. A single fruit could power a human dwelling for a week. Liu, how many of these did your fields produce this month? About 3,000, Liu replied casually. And that's just from the test plots. Once we expand to the full valley, we're looking at maybe 50,000 per month. Dr. Stone smiled. 50,000. Energy melons per month would be enough to power a city. Back on Earth, such technology would revolutionize civilization. Here on Corath Prime, it was just one of dozens of innovations the colonists had developed by working with their environment instead of against it. In settlements expanded communication center, Torres was fielding the 5th request for emigration that day. The calls had been coming in steadily for months. Humans from colonies across the galaxy who wanted to relocate to what had become known as the Miracle World. New Shanghai Colony. This is Corath Prime, Torres said into her headset. Yes, we're still accepting the residents, But I have to warn you about the application process. It's not as simple as just showing up. The voice on the other end was eager, almost desperate. We understand there are challenges, but we've heard about the opportunities, the resource extraction, the new technologies, the quality of life improvements. Torres looked out the window at the thriving settlement. The original 500 colonists had grown to over 2,000 people, with more arriving every week. But not everyone who came to Corath Prime succeeded. The planet still demanded respect, adaptation, and the right attitude. The biggest challenge isn't the environment, Torres explained patiently. It's changing how you think about the environment. Corath Prime doesn't just test your survival skills, it tests your ability to become part of something larger than yourself. This was a lesson that had taken months for even the humans to fully understand. Corath Prime wasn't hostile to all life. It was protective of its own ecosystem. Species that tried to dominate or exploit the planet faced its wrath. But species that learned to contribute to the ecosystem's health and balance found themselves welcomed and supported. Failed alien expeditions had approached Corath Prime like conquerors. They'd brought weapons to fight the wildlife, machines to reshape the landscape, and shields to protect themselves from the environment. Every action had marked them as threats to be eliminated. Humans had initially made the same mistakes, but their natural adaptability had allowed them to recognize the pattern and change their approach. Instead of fighting the planet, they'd learned to dance with it. Captain Reed walked through the settlement's newest district, where human architects worked alongside native crystal formations to create buildings that seemed to grow from the planet itself. The structures were more beautiful than anything he'd seen on Earth. Organic curves that channeled wind and rain into power systems, walls that filtered air and regulated temperature naturally, foundations that actually strengthened the ground. They were built on. Captain called Engineer Mills from the construction site of their newest project. "You need to see this." Reed approached the foundation dig where Mills and his team were working on what would become Corath Prime's first industrial complex. But instead of the usual concrete and steel construction, they were cultivating specialized organisms that would serve as living machinery. "We've successfully bred the processor colonies," Mills explained, pointing to what looked like a pool of shimmering metallic liquid. "These organisms can break down raw ore and separate rare minerals with 99.7% efficiency. No heat, no toxic waste, no energy consumption beyond basic feeding." Reed stared at the pool of living metal refiners. "How long until full production?" 2 weeks for the first line, maybe 6 weeks for full industrial capacity. "Captain, when this gets out, every mining operation in the galaxy is going to want this technology." But Reed was thinking about more than just mining. The implications of truly biological technology. Organisms that could manufacture, process, and refine materials without the industrial pollution that plagued most civilized worlds would change everything. Not just for humans, but for every species in the galaxy. "Mills, I want you to start documenting everything. Full technical specifications, breeding protocols, care and feeding requirements. Make sure we can teach this to others." Mills looked surprised. "Sir, this technology could give humanity a massive economic advantage. Why would we share it?" Reed looked out over their thriving settlement where human children played alongside alien creatures in perfect harmony. "Because that's not what Corath Prime has taught us. This planet doesn't reward greed or competition. It rewards cooperation and balance. If we try to hoard these innovations, we'll be acting like the old alien expeditions that failed here. In the observation ship, Ambassador Vex read the latest intelligence reports with growing alarm. The humans on Corath Prime weren't just surviving. They were thriving in ways that challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. Economic projections show that Corath Prime will be the most productive world in 3 sectors within a year, reported his aide. Their resource extraction rates exceed anything we've seen, but with zero environmental damage. Their agricultural yields are impossible by conventional standards, and their technological innovations. I can read, Vex snapped. But his anger was directed at himself as much as the situation. Every projection the Council had made about humanity's failure on Corath Prime had been wrong. Sir, we've also detected unauthorized Council species attempting to establish their own settlements on Class 15 worlds. 2 Vex expeditions, 1 Zapirian research team, and a crash mining operation. All of them citing the human success model as justification. Vex felt his stomach clench. If other species started successfully colonizing death worlds using human techniques, the entire balance of galactic power would shift. The most valuable real estate in the galaxy, the resourceric worlds Thate Verion had written off as uninhabitable, would suddenly become the new centers of civilization. And the results of those expeditions, the Vex lasted 3 days before evacuation. The Superians made it a week, but lost half their team to environmental hazards. The crash, the aide paused. The crash are still trying, sir, but their casualty rates are approaching 60%. Of course, they were failing. BX understood now what he'd missed before. The humans hadn't succeeded on Corath Prime because they were tougher or more advanced than other species. They'd succeeded because they'd approached Dekaleng with a fundamentally different mindset. Sir, the aide continued quietly, there's something else. We've been monitoring communications between human colonies. They're planning to establish settlements on 12 more Class 15 worlds within the next 2 years. 12 more worlds. If humans could replicate their Corath Prime success, even half as well, on other death worlds, they would control most resourceric territories in the galaxy within a decade. Contact the Council, Vex said finally. Request an emergency session. We need to discuss revising our approach to humanity. As his aide hurried away, Vex looked one more time at the screen showing the human settlement. What had started as 500 desperate colonists had become a thriving city of over 2,000 people. Their buildings gleamed in harmony with the alien landscape. Their children grew up speaking both human languages and the chemical communication methods of native species. Their scientists had made breakthrough discoveries that would advance galactic knowledge by centuries. The punish method was supposed to humble humanity, had instead given them the keys to galactic dominance. BX had the uncomfortable realization that the hunters had become the prey. The Galactic Council had thought they were setting a trap for humanity. Instead, they had trapped themselves. 1 year after landing on Corath Prime, Captain Reed stood in the Grand Council chamber of what had once been an impossible dream. A thriving human city built in harmony with one of the galaxy's most dangerous worlds. The chamber itself was a marvel of bioengineering. Its walls formed from living crystal that pulsed gently with stored energy from the planet's lightning storms. Around the circular table sat representatives from 12 different human colonies, all of them eager to learn the secrets of Corath Prime's success. But Reed's attention was focused on a large viewing screen that showed an incoming council ship. The first official visit from the Galactic Council since the colony's establishment, Captain, said Dr. Stone, entering the chamber with a thick data pad in her hands. The final numbers are ready for the council presentation. Reed accepted the pad and scrolled through the statistics that told the story of humanity's transformation from galactic newcomers to a major power. In 12 months, Cor had gone from an empty death world to the most economically productive planet in 3 sectors. Population 5,847 humans, with immigration requests backlogged for 18 months. Resource production 340% above galactic average for similar-sized colonies. Technological innovations 67 major breakthroughs, including biological manufacture.